At 48 years old, Daniel was one of the wealthiest businessmen in the city. His company owned luxury apartment buildings, office towers, restaurants, and several hotels across the state. His name appeared in newspapers. His photograph appeared at charity dinners. Business magazines described him as disciplined, brilliant, and unstoppable. But nobody who wrote about Daniel knew that he hated coming home. His penthouse occupied the top 2 floors of a glass tower overlooking the city. It had floor-to-ceiling windows, expensive furniture, original paintings, a private elevator, and a kitchen that was larger than the entire apartment Daniel had grown up in. Yet every evening, when Daniel entered through the private elevator, the silence seemed to become heavier. There was no child running toward him, no wife asking how his day had been, no family dinner waiting at the table, just polished floors, expensive art, and the faint echo of his own footsteps. Daniel had once believed that money could solve almost anything. He had been wrong. Years earlier, Daniel had been married to a woman named Emily. She had been warm, patient, and completely unimpressed by his wealth. When they first met, Daniel was still struggling to build his company. They lived in a small apartment, shared one old car, and sometimes argued over whether they could afford to eat at a restaurant that charged $12 for a meal. Emily never complained. She used to tell him, "Daniel, someday you'll have everything you want. Just don't forget to become someone you can still recognize when you get there." Daniel had laughed whenever she said it. Then came their son, Noah. Noah was the center of their world. He was a small boy with dark brown hair, bright eyes, and a laugh that could fill an entire room. He loved toy airplanes, chocolate milk, and bedtime stories. Whenever Daniel came home from work, Noah would run toward him shouting, "Daddy." Those were the happiest years of Daniel's life. But they didn't last. Daniel became obsessed with his company. One deal became 3. 3 became 10. His meetings grew longer. His trips became more frequent. He began missing dinners, then birthdays, then school performances. Emily tried to warn him. "Daniel, Noah doesn't understand why you're never here." "I'm doing this for him," Daniel would say. Emily would look at him sadly. "He doesn't need a bigger house. He needs his father." Daniel always promised to make more time. He never did. One winter evening, when Noah was 8 years old, Emily called Daniel at work. Noah had been waiting for him to come home because his school was holding a small Christmas performance. Daniel was supposed to attend. "I'll be there," he had promised that morning. But a business deal had gone wrong. Daniel told Emily he couldn't leave. "Just tonight," he said. Emily was silent for several seconds. Then she said, "You always say just tonight." Daniel remembered being angry. He remembered telling her that she didn't understand how important the company was. He remembered hanging up. What he didn't know was that those would be the last words he ever spoke to Emily. On the drive home that evening, Emily's car was struck by another vehicle at an intersection. The accident happened only a few miles from the school. Emily died before reaching the hospital. Noah survived, but he was badly injured. Daniel's entire world collapsed. For months afterward, he couldn't sleep. He blamed himself. He blamed the company. He blamed every meeting he had attended instead of going home. But grief doesn't negotiate. It simply takes what it wants. Noah eventually recovered physically, but emotionally he became distant. Daniel tried to repair everything with gifts. A new bicycle, a gaming console, a bigger bedroom, expensive vacations. But Noah wanted only one thing: his father. One afternoon, Noah asked Daniel, "Why couldn't you come that night?" Daniel had no answer. He wanted to say that he had been working, that he was trying to build a future, that he never imagined anything bad would happen. Instead, he simply said, "I'm sorry." Noah looked at him. "I know, Dad." Then he walked away. Years passed. Noah grew older, and eventually he left home. He stopped calling. Daniel continued building his empire. But somewhere inside him, a little boy was still sitting at a school auditorium, waiting for his father to walk through the door. That was the man who stepped out of the luxury restaurant on that cold December evening. Daniel had just finished an expensive dinner with several investors. They had celebrated a major business acquisition. Everyone had laughed. Everyone had raised glasses. Everyone had congratulated Daniel. But when he walked outside, the cold air felt strangely peaceful. He stood beside his car, adjusting his coat. That's when he saw the boy. The child was perhaps 9 years old, maybe 10. His clothes were old and slightly too large. His shoes were worn. His hair was messy from the wind, but his eyes were unusually calm. Daniel initially looked away. He had learned over the years not to get involved. There were charities. There were shelters. There were organizations. He donated money every year. He didn't have to personally solve every problem. Then the boy spoke. "Sir." Daniel stopped. "Yes." The boy swallowed nervously. "Could you help me?" Daniel reached into his wallet. The boy shook his head. "I don't need money." Daniel looked confused. "What do you need?" The boy glanced toward the restaurant. "Food." Something about the answer struck Daniel harder than it should have. "Food." The boy nodded. "I haven't eaten since yesterday." Daniel stared at him. "You haven't eaten all day?" The boy shook his head. "Since yesterday." Daniel looked at the restaurant, then at the child. "Where are your parents?" The boy's expression changed. "My mom is sick." "Where is she?" "At home." "Does she need a doctor?" The boy hesitated. "She needs food first." Daniel felt something tighten in his chest. "What is your name?" "Lucas." "Lucas, why didn't you ask me for money?" The boy looked genuinely surprised. "Because money isn't food." Daniel almost smiled. Almost. Instead, he crouched down so they were at eye level. "All right, Lucas, come inside." The boy immediately stepped backward. "No." Daniel frowned. "Why not?" "They won't let me in." "They will." Lucas shook his head. "They already told me." Daniel looked toward the restaurant. A security guard stood near the entrance. Daniel suddenly understood. The child had probably been turned away before. "Come with me," Daniel said. Lucas hesitated. Then he followed. The moment they entered the restaurant, several people turned to look. The contrast was obvious. Daniel wore a tailored black coat, an expensive watch. Lucas wore a worn jacket and shoes that were beginning to fall apart. A hostess approached. "Mr. Whitmore is everything. Bring us the biggest meal you have." She looked at Lucas. Daniel added, "And make sure he gets whatever he wants." Lucas sat carefully at the table. He didn't touch the menu. Daniel noticed. "What's wrong?" Lucas looked at the prices. "I don't want something expensive." Daniel closed the menu. "Tonight, you don't have to worry about the price." Lucas looked at him. "Can I get chicken?" "Of course." "And bread?" "Yes." "And maybe some soup?" "Anything." Lucas smiled. It was a tiny smile, but Daniel hadn't seen one like it in years. When the food arrived, Lucas stared at it for several seconds. Then he began eating, not quickly, carefully, as if he were afraid someone might take the plate away. Daniel watched him. The boy tore a piece of bread into 2 pieces. He ate one, then wrapped the other in a napkin. Daniel asked, "Why are you saving it?" "For my mom." Daniel looked away. Something inside him cracked. He remembered Noah at 8 years old. He remembered his son saving the last piece of cake for Emily. He remembered how children loved their mothers without asking whether they deserved it. "Lucas," Daniel said quietly, "you can order another meal for your mother." The boy looked up. "Really? Really?" Lucas smiled. And Daniel realized he had not heard that kind of innocent gratitude in a very long time. After dinner, Daniel asked Lucas where he lived. Lucas hesitated. "You don't have to tell me. I can show you." Daniel followed him through several blocks. The bright city slowly disappeared. Luxury stores became old buildings. Clean sidewalks became cracked pavement. Finally, Lucas stopped in front of a small apartment building. "That's where we live." Daniel looked up. The building was old. Several windows were broken. The entrance light flickered. Lucas opened the door. "Mom." A weak voice came from inside. "Lucas." "It's me." Then the woman saw Daniel. Her face changed. "Who are you?" Lucas quickly explained. "He bought us food." The woman looked embarrassed. "I'm sorry." Daniel shook his head. "You don't need to apologize." Her name was Sarah. She was 34 years old. She had once worked as a hotel housekeeper, but after becoming sick, she could no longer work regularly. She had been raising Lucas alone. There was no husband, no family nearby, no savings left. And after months of medical bills, rent, and groceries, she had reached the point where she was choosing between medicine and food. Daniel listened. He didn't interrupt. When she finished, he asked, "Why didn't you ask for help?" Sarah looked down. People don't like being asked. Daniel knew that feeling. Not because he had ever been poor, but because he had spent years refusing to ask anyone for help with his own pain. Daniel stood up. I'll arrange a doctor. Sarah immediately shook her head. No, it's not charity. Mr. Whitmore. Daniel. She looked at him. Daniel, I can't repay you. You don't have to. Lucas suddenly said, Mom, he bought me chicken. Daniel smiled. Sarah looked at her son. Then she looked at Daniel. And for the first time, tears appeared in her eyes. Thank you. Daniel nodded. He wanted to leave. But before he did, Lucas asked a question. Will you come back tomorrow? Daniel froze. Nobody had asked him that in years. People asked him for meetings,